Hello and welcome to Business Insights. In a downturn, having business leaders with the right skills and the best insights can pull a company through even the most challenging of environments. In fact, tough times can often bring out the best in terms of leadership and creativity. So how can firms nurture and develop managers and executives into leaders capable of turning today's problems into tomorrow's opportunities? Here to discuss this is Dr. Babis Menemelis, Assistant Professor of Organisational Behaviour at London Business School. Babis, first of all, many people tend to think of creativity as easier to maintain for leaders during prosperous times, but you don't believe this is necessarily the case, do you? Why can tough environments often bring out the best leadership skills?
Well, yes, it is true. Most people tend to think of creativity as the cherry on the pie. The organization solves all other problems, and then this is the time to be creative. Sometimes that is true, but we know that creativity can happen in difficult times, in easy times, in all different types of times. In the last 8 years, I've asked over 4,000 executives to identify the people that they consider as great leaders. And as you can expect, there is great variability in their answers due to their experience or culture. However, most of the people that they identify as great leaders appear to fall into two basic categories. First of all, there are those who had to lead in really difficult, tough times, and they were able to stand up and meet effectively the challenge. And then there are those who made their times, purposively, made their times way more difficult than they had to. And what I mean by that is that they didn't rest upon the laurels of past success. They didn't find the easy way out to enjoy, for example, a prosperous situation, but they kept on posing more stretching, more challenging objectives and goals for themselves and for their groups. So what I mean is that I think it is misleading to think of leadership in tough times as a kind of an exception to the rule or as a kind of a unique situation. Truth is that great leaders usually make the mark during these tough, difficult times.
So you almost make it sound as though being a leader during the good times can be more tricky. Is this the case?
Well, I don't suggest that we should make times more tricky so that we can help great leaders to arise, for sure. However, in some ways I think this is the case. For example, we know that succession in leadership tends to be very, very difficult when you have to succeed a highly successful leader who leaves behind a good, prosperous situation. For the incoming leader, for the person who now comes and has to live up to the leadership role, this is one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult, type of succession scenario. It is difficult to follow up on the reputation of a great leader, and it's very difficult to take a very easy, prosperous type of situation and influence people to follow you to make this better. So what happens during tough times, no matter how difficult and emotionally taxing they might be, they invite fresh thinking, vision, challenging objectives, and young executives who have the insight and the leadership competencies, they will find it perhaps on balance a little bit easier to rise, to ascend to leadership in the first place.
So what do people expect from leaders during tough times as opposed to the boom years?
Fundamentally, I think that they are not expecting different types of things. I think they expect more or less the same things. Meaning, hope and mobilization. There are three fundamental things that people usually expect from their leaders. What is different in tough times is that people seek these qualities in a higher degree of intensity. And the other thing is that usually these tough times provide leaders with more opportunities to influence more people and their emotions and their mindsets during these times. For example, consider meaning. People always expect from their leaders to help them make sense of their world. This happens in boom times or in difficult times. What you will find, however, is that in prosperous times, in boom times, people tend to be more resistant to altering their own mindsets. And in management science, you can imagine how many terms we have to describe this very phenomenon. We call it people getting trapped in psychological webs of their own creation, or people becoming prisoners of inflexible mindsets, the paradox of success, organizational inertia to change. And all these terms, what these terms actually express is that when things go well, people are much less likely to alter or to question their own mindsets. What happens in tough times, you may have, they're ambivalent, they're ambiguous, which means people are more likely to question their assumptions and the way they frame reality, to be more open to understand that perhaps the way they interpret and perceive the world and their markets and the way they act may not be the best response to the situation. And that allows leaders to come in and to influence people's minds and to alter them towards a more positive direction. I'm not saying that directly this is an easy thing to do, but on balance it is easier to influence people's mindsets when the environment gives you negative feedback that these mindsets now actually are not very effective. They're not really helping you be very productive or adapt effectively to your role. The same thing happens in terms of hope. We know that great leaders provide people with hope, but as you know, people who don't need hope, there isn't much you can do, right? You can see, for example, the cosmetics industry, they will say that we sell hope, and you have to really consider to whom they sell hope. You don't sell hope to someone who doesn't need it, right? So what happens during these tough times, people emotionally tend to become more concerned, to experience more fear, if you will, and that makes them more willing to accept and to look for hope from their leaders. So a leader who has this capability to offer hope to people, to inspire them, will find them that they can have greater impact during these times. Same is true, I think, about mobilization. We know that sometimes people and organizations will resist positive change, they will resist transformation efforts simply because they feel that there's no good reason why they should change something. In tough times, you do have a sense of urgency. People know that something's going wrong, that they must take some positive action. So again, the opportunity for leaders is present to use all the creativity to be able to say, well, the change that we need to make is not only important, it is urgent, we must take action. And as long as the leader knows well where this action should be oriented to, it is way more easy for them to have a positive impact on their communities.
So to achieve all of this, what sort of skills should a leader display, and how can companies nurture these skills?
It's a very, very complex phenomenon, of course, but I think there are two basic categories of skills. The first is what we call the overarching, all-around leadership skills. And this includes things like the ability to know the basics of the business, the ability to think in flexible, creative ways, emotional intelligence, the ability to inspire, communication skills, power-related skills, the ability to be able to influence others, and so forth and so on. And then there is also the second category I would call as insight, simply meaning that the leader now has a very good understanding of what is going on, what are the causes and reasons that led us to these difficult times, and what would be the best way to get out of this, and of course how can we turn these difficult times into an opportunity for recreating or rejuvenating the organization. That's what I mean by insight. And you will find that there are some leaders who actually do not have these all-around leadership skills, and they don't have insight. They really don't know what's going on. And these people tend to be the leaders I call clueless, in the sense that they really don't know what the situation is. They find it very, very difficult to inspire, to provide hope. And such people actually find it very, very difficult even to keep their jobs in difficult times, simply because people with greater intensity expect something from them. And as long as you don't have what it takes, the situation, the world really strips you naked, and people actually can see that you don't have the basic skills. A second type of leader is what sometimes we may call the failed reformist. And this is a person who has the insight, knows very well and in depth what's going on. These are people who have a good idea of what is that the community, the organization has to do. However, they lack the basic leadership skills. They cannot inspire, cannot communicate very effectively. And this is the reason that usually makes them failed reformists. They may have the ideas and the content of the ideas, but they cannot really persuasively communicate and mobilize people toward their direction. A third type of leader is a leader who has some good all-around skills, especially some people skills, social skills, the ability to influence. And these skills allow them to keep their jobs, to stay up to the leadership positions. However, they lack insight. They really cannot explain logically, reasonably the situation, and they have no idea what the company should do to transcend it. And this is people actually, I find that there are people who really love dialogue, because they don't have anything new to say. Usually they will just call people and say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? They will go fishing for ideas. And sometimes actually they might be able to use some of their ideas using the leadership skills, but clearly they're not the most effective person to be on a leadership job. This will not be the most desirable type of situation in leadership. And the last category are the people who I consider truly creative leaders, people who have the all-around leadership skills and a high degree of insight in the situation. And these are the people that you will find that can really do very, very well during difficult times, because they have the insight, they have the skills, and instead of being afraid of the situation, they will use it. They will use it as an opportunity for recreating, rejuvenating the organization. I can give you an example of a leader that it's not from the current crisis, it's from something that happened here in London 30 years ago. Clive Gillinson, who took over London Symphony Orchestra, who was really troubled at the time. Many people thought that he was going to shut down, was going bankrupt. And he was able to gradually take this really problematic and not very famous or well thought of orchestra in a period of 20 years to transform it to one of the most prestigious, rich orchestras in the world. And this is someone I would consider a creative leader, because he had a great insight in terms of what were the problems, what needed to be changed, but he also had some great ability to persuade people, to connect them, to inspire them. For example, before Gillinson, London Symphony Orchestra, you had, for example, people thinking in very, very individualistic terms. They would ask, what is it that I can get from the orchestra? He was able to persuade them that you must think first of the orchestra, what is that you can do, we can all do, to help this orchestra get out of trouble, to become stronger, to become richer, to become most famous. And then, in all fairness, you can ask for a larger share of the pie. And I'm just giving an example here, but this is someone I would consider a truly creative leader who has what it takes.
Do companies have to spot the qualities in existing managers, do you think, to become good leaders, or can they nurture those skills?
Well, I think that's a very good question. Well, let me say first, I think this is one of the problems that we see in many companies. Sometimes what happens in many companies is that they promote people to leadership roles for all the bad reasons. And I think one thing that companies can learn is that they should not promote, or otherwise they should not allow, people who are not interested in leadership to enact leadership roles. We know that many people actually accept a promotion to a leadership role not because they are truly motivated to lead. Sometimes some people actually do not even want to spend time with other people, inspiring and communicating with them, simply because this is the job that pays more, gives you more prestige and recognition, is the logical evolution in your career path. I think it's a very, very bad type of decision, and I think companies should be more cognizant that some people do not want to lead. That's fine, not everybody has to be a leader, and people can make themselves useful in many different other ways. So that's one thing that companies actually should stop promoting people based on past skills, for example in functional areas. They should just somehow be more cognizant that we have to understand that some people have more of what it takes, and these are the people perhaps we need to promote to do leadership roles. A corollary theme here is that I find sometimes companies promoting people, actually throwing people into a leadership role without training them first, and without giving them the time to really master the skills that they need to lead effectively. And there is a set of skills that all of us can improve: emotional intelligence, inspiring, communicating, and it's certainly way more productive when you have the chance to develop these skills before you are called to enact them in a leadership role. Transition is very, very important, as in any other change in our lives. I would also add some other things that I think companies can do. For example, I think it's important to nurture a culture of leadership. I find that in many companies, when people talk about leadership, what they mean is the leader. It's a very person-centric view of leadership. In my view, this is not very productive. It is way more effective to have a culture of leadership that includes, but it's not limited to, the person who enacts the leadership role. If you ask people, do you think that followers influence the quality of leadership? Everybody will say yes. We know that. We know that people get the leaders they deserve. However, many companies actually don't spend time or funds to train people to be good followers, and that's problematic. It's way more effective to create a culture of leadership where you pay attention not only who's the leader, but also who are the followers, and how can we really strengthen fellowship in the organization. And I would say just one more thing I would mention here is that we should try to get away from this idea that leadership is being on the top of the hill, is something glamorous, is something that pays more. And we should try to instill more values about leadership, that leadership first and foremost is an ethical responsibility. Those who can lead should lead, not because of the recognition of the higher pay, simply because they can make a greater contribution. And that's a great aspect of the value of leadership that I think is more productive for companies and the society in large.
Okay, Dr. Babis Menomelis, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.